Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 Oh. Oh. For those of you on the Discord, what a time it's been for me. For those of you who are just tuning in, I have been sick. You can probably still hear it in my voice. Holy cow, guys. This COVID shit. This COVID stuff. Boo. Boo, COVID. Boo. It's the worst. I literally had 2 days where I could not open my eyes. Literally 2 days where I could not open my eyes. It was just pain to even look at anything. And I basically just slept for 4 days straight. Yeah, pretty much just 4 days straight. Waking up to basically just use the bathroom and eat. And that's kind of it. Just absolutely gross. Major, good to see you, bud. Good to see you, bud. I hope you're doing well out there. What a time. What a time we're all having, eh? I think the theme that I've been really noticing, people are starting to understand a little bit more. There's more awareness coming in that we are pivoting to fascism. That it's no longer just some college student being oh goodness, this is what happened in the fascist time. Oh, you think that everything is fascism? Oh, blah blah. People are really starting to take more and more seriously that the society, that Western civilization is turning fascist, and it's pretty clear that nobody knows what to do about it. It's pretty clear that there are some people who are trying to still kind of pretend or move on business as usual kind of stuff, but there's this nervous giggling that's happened. Broccoli cheddar rice, good to see you, bud. Over this last week, what I've been seeing is just article after article of what has to be described as just a desperate people. Just desperate people who don't know where to turn, don't know what to do, and don't know how to organize in order to confront this absolute madness that we're all experiencing. My name is actually Jonathan. I go by the name Jonathan. But if you want to call me John with or without the H, it doesn't hurt me at all. Doesn't cause me any problems. Oh, I'm so glad you guys are here. Good to see you guys. I hope you're all doing well out there. It's I admit that it's been a difficult week. Mystic, absolute pleasure, bud. I hope you're doing well. One of the things that I've been seeing around, of course, is the rise of mega communism. Right, we're seeing more and more. I think Infrared is his name. Recently went out and did a whole thing, spoke to a whole bunch of people, never said the word communism, of course, just spreading the idea that because people, if you say we should get the working class together, people will go yeah to that. Well, I mean, if you take a cursory glance at the history of fascism, you find out pretty quickly that that's how the fascists rolled, right? That's how they gained power. You can see that with Pierre Poilievre right now. Pierre Poilievre's doing a really great job of garnering public support, of gaining support by catering to a disenfranchised working class, right? By speaking to them. And everybody's going to vote for them, and then what's going to happen, right? The fascists do as the fascists do, and they betray everybody. Because they're fascists. So we've got a couple of powerful articles today, and I'm going to really test myself. Oh, first thing I think that is worth pointing out, always worth starting with some good news, right? Army misses recruiting goal by 15,000 soldiers. Great. Absolutely fantastic. One of the, when you study the fall of the Roman Empire, right? When you study the fall of the Roman Empire, one of the attributing factors is simply that people stopped joining the military, right? That religious groups, the rise of Christianity, right? The rise of religious organizations that were essentially anti-war, and that were fomenting internal struggle and internal strife within the borders of the Roman Empire, really deplete the power and deplete the ability of the Roman Empire to field powerful militaries, right? And that was always the Roman Empire's strength, is their capacity to wield military force. They essentially perfected the art of war, and that's what made the Roman Empire so terrifying. Is that you had a state that was ruled by total psychos, like complete sycophants and complete psychopaths, who were fine with doing things like crucifying people and like all this kind of just absolutely barbarous, vicious bullshit. Like we talk about how violence has been normalized today, but like the level of violence that the people of the Roman Empire were experiencing, and the amount of normalization, like the amount that you would have to literally to just live in the Roman Empire, the amount of violence that you would personally witness and just have to kind of shrug off and just be like, yeah, that's normal, right? And chances are really good that if you live in the Roman Empire, you would see people be crucified. Like, you would witness it with your own two eyes. It would not be an abstraction. And you kind of have to pick your side on that, you know? You kind of have to pick, is that darkly evil or is that necessary? You know? And as we head towards that ourselves, you know, as we begin to build a governmental power that begins to act that way, but with technology, with digital means, right? With robotic means, we're going to experience similar sort of stuff. And so it's good to see that the army is beginning to decline, that it's that people are beginning to realize that the best way to change the society, if you think it's going wrong, is to stop participating in it. And absolutely, at this stage in the game, like, the people who are participating in the United States military at this point are fascists. They're all of this absurdist rhetoric that is used, like we're defending the motherland, or we're spreading peace and democracy and all this kind of stuff. It's just fucking nonsense. And it should be treated as such. Like, it should really be treated as such. Like, when we are dealing with American military personnel and more Canadian military personnel, we are dealing with fascists. There's just no other way to describe them anymore. They're not fighting for peace or security or safety or any of that. They're fighting to dominate the globe on white supremacist lines. That's what they're doing. Mystic Werewolf says mega communism. So when Trump supporters said America will never be a socialist country, motherfuckers meant we skip the developing stages and go straight down to communism. Yeah, exactly, Mystic. Yeah, we don't need to develop communism. You see, in America, right, we do things right. We do things right the first time. And so when we want something to happen, right, we just do it. We don't need to develop it, right? USA. Absolutely, Mystic. I'm more than happy to answer them, bud. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're here. I hope that there are more people like you who show up in my chat one day, who are asking questions and trying to discover something about what communism is and how we can manifest it in the world, because that's how it's all gonna happen, bud. And every time you're in here asking me questions, it makes me feel real good, bud. It makes me feel real good. Oh, I can feel it. Not feel it. My voice feels fine, but I definitely hear it. I hope that you guys can hear me okay. Oh man, I'm glad I got my tea. I'm gonna go as long as I can today, guys. So we'll see. So I got a good article here by Rainer Shea. Hey Mark, how you doing, bud? Absolutely great to see you. Please, guys, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the thing, right? You know the thing. Hit the like button. Get those likes up. I keep getting told by the algorithm that if you guys hit the likes, then it actually does spread it around. But We'll see. We'll see. Oh, I had been meaning to, before I got sick, I had been meaning to, I want to get the multi-streaming going on, because I can stream simultaneously on Twitch. And it's something that I have been meaning to do, but I just have been so, I don't know, blown away by everything, right? I've been so overwhelmed by everything. And I feel like one of the benefits of this sickness is that it really forced me to slow down, and it forced me to sort of like get my head back, and I feel less overwhelmed by everything, you know? I feel like I've got to remind myself that, like, I can take all this at my own pace, you know? I can take this at my own pace. I don't need to rush, right? I don't need to rush. What we're doing here is just trying to build a little group to deal with this fucking nonsense. And it's nonsense. Like, it's total nonsense. We don't need to do any of it. We're going to do it anyway. This is from Rainer Shea. The U.S. government is one step away from fully unleashing its global warfare tools upon its own people. This is something that's been a long time coming, right? That the militarization of the police, the heavy militarization on the police is is absolutely going to rear its head. Like, we're going to see all of these, like, robot dogs and all this shit on the streets. Like, when the drones are in the sky, man, that's when we know shit's going to get real. I never got your answer on your stance on social issues. This is Mystic Werewolf. Like, what are your thoughts on weed, sex work, and drugs? All of it should be free and open and available. Like, the studies are in. This isn't even a communist thing. This is straight up just sense. This is just good sense. We have studied these issues, that if you criminalize drugs or sex work, you drive it underground, you create a prison industrial complex, right? You incarcerate a bunch of people needlessly. The same amount of people use it. It's just that now the system is full of terror and abuse. And what occurs is the rise of gangsters. Right? You saw this with, like, Al Capone during the Prohibition, right? What was Al Capone doing? He was distributing rum. That's what he was doing, right? And he was this great gangster and all this kind of stuff. And Rusty, good to see you. Matthias, good to see you guys. Real good to see you guys. So glad you're here. And we have seen societies that were experiencing, like, absolute nightmare level scenarios, like people doing heroin in daylight in, like, children's parks and ODing, right? Like, I think this was like Portugal. Portugal was the real big one, and they just decided they were going to decriminalize everything. They were going to decriminalize all drugs, and what they found is that not only did it ease the burden on the police and on the prison system, on the legal system, right? Because they had to, they no longer were incarcerating people for, like, having a joint or something. They also found that people did it less. People did less drugs, and the people who were caught in the cycle of drug abuse and drug use, they could go and get assistance and go get help. And the society starts treating it like a health crisis. They stop treating it like a crime, and they start treating it like a health crisis. And once it's treated as a health crisis, then people can actually go get help without fear of being incarcerated, without fear of some police officer or cop getting involved. And do people still use? Sure, but it's way less, and and the negative aspects of it, the negative social aspects. You can talk about it, a negative aspects from an individual perspective if you like, but from a systemic aspect, it's much better to decriminalize and legalize weed and drugs. And it's the same is true of sex work, right? Oh, great, my voice is like Jordan Peterson now. Perfect. You need to go find the Dragon of Chaos. Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Mystic. And civilians' access to firearms. Civilians should have access to firearms. Like, straight up. Like, I'm from rural Manitoba. A gun is a tool. That's what it is. And if you're having problems with weapons in the society, there's usually another thing going on, right? And especially in today's United States, right? Defanging the populace. Like, if you tried to take guns away from Americans and Canadians, you would have a civil war on your hands that day. It would be that quick. It really would be. Like, I think about my own hometown. Like, if local police enforcement tried to go around and tried to start rounding people's firearms up, I think you'd have a shooting match, right, straight away. Like, it'd be the first thing that would happen. And no, I agree with Marx on this. Is that we should have an armed proletariat, especially given what's about to happen, right? The level of the level of terror that is coming to the United States. And the mechanized terror, I think, is people are not ready for it. People are not prepared for it. They're not psychologically prepared for it. The mechanized terror that's coming to, and is going to become common. It's going to become common. Yeah, we're getting into the classic argument, right? Like, don't get me wrong, Mystic. Like, I wish I lived in a perfect world too, right? I wish I lived in a world where there was no such thing as guns. I think that we shouldn't have created them in the first place. I feel the same about, like, nuclear bombs, right? Like, I feel the same about all this kind of stuff. That we should never have invented this stuff. But, too bad. Like, straight up, it's too bad. It's over. Like, that ship has sailed, right? And it's not about good guy with a gun versus bad guy with a gun. It's about the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And if you have a disarmed proletariat, then the bourgeoisie will just rule with violence, right? They will, and that to me is it's self-evident. Like, throughout all of human history, the people with the weapons and the people with the training in those weapons rule, and that's what happens. This little, we had like this little flash in the pan moment where we had unions and we had a strong communist movement, we had a strong socialist movement, we had this little flash in the pan that I think a lot of people look at and think that that's normal. Right? A lot of people were coming out of that period. And there are people who, the boomer generation especially, lived that life. Right? They lived the beneficial life of having a strong and powerful labor movement. Right? That was politically connected and was actually able to get things done. And we have fooled ourselves into believing that that's typical, that that's normal, and it isn't. Right? What's normal is a well-armed, well-trained, powerful bourgeoisie terrorizing its citizens. That's what's normal, right? And that's coming. That's coming back to us in big and in very serious ways. The drones are already there. Yeah, heard of the surveillance plane in Detroit or Baltimore, filmed whole city. Any crimes film, they could just rewind, to find person. I mean, we've seen this over and over again, right? Like when Jeff Bezos flies in a bunch of drones, he flies a big blimp in, and the blimp has 1,000 drones in it. And the news headline is Jeff Bezos to launch new distribution through blimp. I look at that and I say, yep, that's the U.S. military, right? They've already prepared, they've already trained, and they just used their media apparatus as cover in order to con people and to be like, oh, this is just for distribution. This is just how people get soap. You know, when I order something off of Amazon, it's coming from that blimp. That's what's gonna happen, right? No, it's so obvious that it's like a blimp full of terror drones. Like that's what it's for. And I feel the same about this robot dog that we keep seeing. I feel the same. Hey, Liggins-y, good to see you. I've gotten better, but you can hear my voice. People are already making fun of me for sounding like Jordan Peterson. Maybe that's what's going on with Peterson. Maybe Peterson's just perpetually sick. Huh? Maybe he's just constantly dealing with... He always had COVID. Oh, no. Oh. John Smith, what are you referring to here, bud? Today's a good day. Russia's getting blitzkrieged and Ukraine is getting its territory back. What are you referring to there? I mean, I know that like a week ago now, Ukraine gained a little bit of territory. But I feel like that story has been completely overwhelmed by the referendums that have been held throughout the referendums that have been held throughout the Donbass region. That those regions are becoming part of Russia, and so. Oh. Yeah, COVID was released through his copies of his 12 Rules to Life books. It all makes sense now, of course. Of course, at the same time that the 12 Rules to Life were coming out. That's when COVID really swept through the nation. Oh my God. Peterson was a supervillain all along. Russia versus Ukraine, fascists versus Nazis. I think it's more like oligarchs versus Nazis. Like, and if we really wanted to be fair, it would be oligarchs versus fascists. That the Azov Battalion is the Azov Battalion has been fairly dismantled. Like it's not the same fighting force that it used to be, and the NATO is now more heavily involved in that conflict than it has been before. That's how they were able to seize territory, is that it was NATO involvement. And I just don't see, like, anybody who's waving their flag being like, yeah, NATO and Ukraine's going to win this thing. I'm like, Russia is literally fielding like 200,000 men right now. Like, literally. Like, 200,000 men. The European nations are not doing that. NATO isn't doing that, right? Like it's just like a basic numbers game, you know. At some point, it does just come down to like, oh, you have 200,000 people and the other side does not, you know. Like what? And anytime the United States goes, we need to recruit more people. Well, we're seeing the result of that, right? People are more than willing to change their little profile pic to like a yellow and blue flag and be like, I stand with Ukraine. But if you say like, hey, do you want to go fight? People are like, no. Like, obviously not. So like, it doesn't, to me, it just like, what's terrifying about the situation? What's terrifying about the situation is the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. That really raises the stakes. That really creates a true terror scenario, where like now we're seeing that the United States and let's not mince words. The United States destroyed that pipeline. Like anybody who's gonna stand in front of you and be like, "Well, no, we're not sure who don't," like, fuck you, straight up, fuck you. Like, you're telling me that the day 9/11 happened, we knew who the guy that did it was, but like, oh, here's this pipeline destruction, and we're all like, I know it could have been, maybe it was Russia that did it, you know, could have been Russia that did it. Like, it's like, shut up, it's so dumb. So the United States destroys the Nord Stream pipeline. Demand better. Absolute pleasure to see you. Generation YB, I don't think I actually said hello. Hello. And the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline means that peace is not an option. That's what makes it scary. Is that it's going to make it so much more difficult to come to a negotiation. And Zelensky is straight up saying that he doesn't want to anymore. So it's just like perpetual endless war now. That like any hope that anybody actually has of there being some kind of negotiated peace, forget it. Like, forget it. It is all going to be, it is just going to be endless and perpetual war, because that's what the United States wants. And that's just the truth of it. And the United States position is, we're going to weaken Russia. Yuck. We're going to weaken Russia by being in a perpetual, never-ending war. Forgetting that, of course, you're also weakening yourself, right? That you are also in a never-ending perpetual war. And Harry Potter is not communist. For God's sakes, he becomes a cop at the end. Like, Harry Potter is... Harry Potter is like a liberal jerk-off. That's what Harry Potter essentially ends up being. Like, and let me be clear about something. Nothing wrong with Harry Potter, right? If what you want is the classic, like, hero's journey, like, little boy destined to defeat evil, right? He gets like the magic ability to slay the great demon, and he does so, and all that kind of stuff, and everybody goes, yeah. And I mean, it shows, and there are positive aspects as well, where it's like, oh, you've got to, you actually have to fight fascists. You can't vote fascism out, right? You actually have to fight fascists. But like, the wizarding world is essentially like a feudal, like, they still have slaves, for God's sakes, right? Like, sides of slavers, yeah, basically. Like those house elves, like, those house elves are slaves, right? And it's made explicitly clear that that's the case, right? Like, Hermione the whole time is like fighting for the house elves, right? And so the society that Harry Potter lives in is kind of just like how would we describe it? Like, it is like an oligarchy. Like, it's a power-based oligarchy, because who are the people who are the most respected? The most powerful wizards, right? So if you have power in the Harry Potter world, that kind of justifies itself. And as long as you don't get expelled, right? As long as you don't get expelled. But the house elves liked the housework. Thanks, Generation Why Me. Willy Wonka is a fascist for sure. Like, well, who are the Oompa Loompas if not slaves? Like, come on. Like no, like, one of the things that's really wild is when you go back through, like, all of your childhood, like, all of this shit that you watched when you were a child, and you just realized how, like, normalized fascism actually is, right? Like, so many things that you watched when you were a kid, you're just like, oh, wait, like, that's really brutal, actually. Like, that's really brutal. And you see that with Harry Potter a lot. Like, people are constantly finding, like, the weird little inconsistencies and the strange little things that come out of Harry Potter. Because Harry Potter, like, Harry Potter isn't really deserving of the analysis that it gets, right? It's just kind of like a children's book, Like, it blew up and it became really huge. And so people think it's got credibility when it doesn't really have credibility, Like, it was never intended to be, like, it's not like the fucking Iliad or something, right? Like, it's not the works of Shakespeare. It's none of that kind of stuff. Like, in 100 years, people are gonna, like, look back and be like, oh yeah, Harry Potter, I guess, right? Like, it was a cultural fad that seized the imagination of the people in that moment, right? That happens all the time, where the zeitgeist just gets captured by this story or an idea, right? It happens all the time. And when you analyze it, you kind of just see that it's like, oh yeah, this is just like fascist bedtime stories. What are your thoughts on immigration? I mean, again, this is one of these things where the studies are in. Immigrants are useful and helpful for a society, right? Not only just from a like, hey, it's good to get people, like if you have like a war-torn area, assuming that you're not the one that's causing the war, which we are, but that's fine. Immigrants coming into your country only make your country better, right? Immigrants are happy to be there. They're happy to be safe. They're happy to be in a place that's not destroying them. They work hard because they're willing to build something. Immigrants really want to build something for their own family's future. And by doing that, they tend to come in and amalgamate with communities. They want to stabilize. They're usually like they're not there to destabilize. They're there to do the opposite. In fact, they're there to stabilize themselves. And from an economic standpoint, immigrants are great, right? Immigration is great, yeah, for the receiving country, absolutely. The unfortunate truth, though, is that they're also great for fascists because fascists love to scapegoat them, right? And it makes it very easy. Immigration. You mean a taco truck on every corner? That's a bit racist, John. I'm going to just point that out. Like, immigrants will come in and they'll end up doing the jobs that other people don't want to do, right? Like, that's the real truth of it. One of the great sort of odd things that's happening in the United States is that there's this labor shortage, quote unquote, i.e. a bunch of people died of COVID. And people are having difficulty filling jobs. Well, and a big reason why they're having difficulty filling those jobs is because the very people who they would use to the very people who would take those jobs would be immigrants, right? But those people, they're shutting them down at the border now. They're not letting people in. And if they do make them in, they're putting them in concentration camps. So yeah, the Americans are doing absolutely the worst things ever. Harry Potter seems like a social democrat rather than a liberal. Speaking of social democracy, what's your thoughts on that and the flaws the system has? Why isn't it enough? You're asking great questions today, Mystic. Whew. I think I gotta slow down a little bit, guys. Sorry. Whew. Social democracy can only exist. Social democracy can only exist if there is a threat of communist revolution. That capitalists will only permit social democracy to exist if there is a more credible and legitimate threat. And the moment that the communist revolution threat is lifted, then the social democracy begins to decline. Because the capitalists are only ceding as much territory as they absolutely must, right? Like, and that tells you how serious the threat of revolution was under FDR. That the capitalists were willing to give away basically everything, right? They gave away a lot. They put forward a lot of concessions under FDR and the New Deal, because the threat of revolution was serious, and the threat of revolution was genuine. But if you don't have that, if that doesn't exist, then whatever gains are made from the concessions of the capitalist class will be seized back, because that's how capitalists are. Like, if they're not sharing, they're not interested in that. And if you have something, it's because you're lazy and entitled and all this. And if they have something, it's because they're geniuses, right? Like, that's how it works. What are your thoughts, AI robots? I mean, in an egalitarian communist society, robots would be the greatest things ever, right? Like, they would do all the labor. We would literally automate everything around us, and everyone would be the beneficiary. In a capitalist system, AI robots are terror, right? They're evil, because you'll have mass poverty, widespread homelessness. People will be abandoned en masse because of the structure of how the system works. That instead of the society owning the robots, it'll be individual owners that'll own the robots, and they'll do exactly what you think they will, right? Not to mention the militarization of robots and like AI robots. Like, I actually consider like AI is a significant threat. Like we're fooling ourselves if we think that like building a robot that's capable of building a robot is a smart thing to do. We're really fooling ourselves if we're walking around just saying like, oh yeah, we should create a robot that can think. Yeah, that'll work out. Like, we're really fooling ourselves. We should also stop people from really needing to leave their countries. Like, brain drain is a problem, and people should be able to thrive in the country they were born in. I have not seen even one iota of credible evidence that shows me that brain drain is a real problem. I think that the brain drain, and just for clarity about what we're talking about, like, the idea of brain drain is that people, like, if Canada trains a bunch of doctors, a lot of those doctors then leave and go to the United States because they can make more money in the United States, right? That's the brain drain argument. When you look at the stats data, the amount of doctors that leave is exactly in line with the amount of anybody that leaves, right? So it's not a brain drain. That the brain drain is really just used as a propaganda tool to split up the working class and suppress wages. That's what it's really for. And there's no, I haven't seen any credible evidence that shows me that there is such a thing as a brain drain. And anytime I look into it, I see the exact opposite happen. It's like, is there someone immigrating from one country to another who is a doctor? Sure, absolutely. Is it at a higher percentage than any other laborer, right? And the answer is always no. It's never a higher percentage. And if it is a higher percentage, it's by like 1 or 2%. It's not like a significant increase, right? For me to believe that there is like a quote unquote brain drain, I'd have to see something like, I'd have to see like at least twice. I'd have to be like, yeah, if the average rate of emigration is 10%, and amongst doctors it's 20%, then I'd be like, oh, okay, so that's like that adds credibility to this. But like, people move around, and everybody's moving around all the time. And I just think that the brain drain argument is just being presented to us as a way to muddy the conversation, and as a way to if you raise taxes too much on the rich, then they'll just leave, right? Well, first of all, my counter to that is great. Get the fuck out of here. We don't need psychos in the country, right? But also, like, no, they don't. Like, they don't. And they don't for exactly the reasons you think they don't, right? Their family lives here. Their connections are here. Their friends are here. Their property is here. Their businesses are here, right? The reason why they're not, like, leaving the country is because to do so, they'd have to sell all their assets. They'd have to sell everything they had. They'd have to say goodbye to their parents, say goodbye to their friends, say goodbye to their family, say goodbye to their business connections, right? And they'd have to move to like wherever, Malaysia or wherever the fuck they're gonna go. Like, so I don't buy it. Like, can you find an example of somebody doing it? Sure, you can find an example of anybody doing anything, right? But is it the norm? Is it the thing that is happening? No, not usually. Anemone, absolute pleasure to see you. Harry Potter becomes a cop in the new movie. Yeah, of course. No, because at the end of the day, like, it's cop apologetics, right? The Social Democrats supported the fascists. Yeah. It is a form of liberalism because it preserves and defends the capitalist class. Yeah, AI is a Pandora's box. It absolutely is. Yeah, social democracy still allows the capitalist class to manipulate the media and democracy until people vote for capitalists and think they've taken over the market and government. I think it's good for transition. I just don't think that you can, like, you'll never ever get to socialism or communism through social democracy. It'll just never go down that way. That the only time you get to social democracy in the first place is if there's a credible threat further down the line. If there's something more credible down the line. Yeah, you don't make it. It doesn't sound good for transition. It sounds like it stops a transition because it's a concession from the capitalists, is what it is. John, brain drain is mainly used for phenomena like the fact that large portions of our healthcare staff in Ontario are moving to other provinces and even other countries. I mean, I think what's happening in Ontario is just an implosion. Like it's beyond brain drain, right? Like I think that there are just lots of people leaving the industry. Like it's just blowing up. To be fair, I haven't really studied the whole brain drain phenomena since like the 90s, right? When it was really used an awful lot. But that to me is like that goes well beyond like the idea of a brain drain, right? Like that's like what we are experiencing is a purposeful implosion. Like there's no other way to describe it. Like this goes beyond incompetence. This goes beyond. It has to be on purpose. It has to. There's just no other. There's no other argument. That to me, what we're seeing here in Ontario is the purposeful implosion of the healthcare system in order to privatize. That's the only thing that makes any sense. Yeah, it's literally just capitalism. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh. So, I wanted to... We keep kind of circling this one. I want to see if I can read it. The U.S. government is one step away from fully unleashing its global warfare tool upon its own people. The counterinsurgency model the U.S. government uses is one that's based in a dual, or rather contradictory, strategy. This is a strategy of crude brutality, along with efforts to win over the hearts and minds of the people who are being violently occupied. It's an absurd way of waging war, one that murders millions of a given country's people, while simultaneously depending on the establishment of a good relationship with those lucky enough to survive the genocide. It's the logical conclusion of neocolonialism, which demands that the imperialists dominate the peripheral countries through perpetual warfare, while acting like these neo-colonies are independent. Oh, I gotta be honest, I can't do it. No, I can't do it. Oh, that sucks. Oh, that sucks. Sorry, guys. I'm not gonna be able to read these articles today. Like, I can talk okay, but, like, the sustained... I don't have it. I don't have it. My apologies. Can't believe I used to like, subscribe, watch fascists like Ben Shapiro, Stephen Crowder, Charlie Kirk, Tim Pool, and Matt Walsh. I feel responsible to contributing to their fame and wealth. Don't feel bad about it, Mystic. Like the power, the amount of wealth and backing that people like Shapiro and Crowder and Kirk and Poole and Walsh have, the amount of backing that they have, like to me it's almost impossible that like they would absolutely be part of the discourse given the amount of wealth that is surrounding them. Oh, I've been drinking lots of water, Anemone. I've been drinking lots of water. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. It's taking more energy than it usually does. It doesn't hurt. It's just taking more energy. And you should not feel responsible, right? Like I talk about this phenomenon all the time, Mystic, where if if there's a billboard in Times Square, just like a big billboard in Times Square, just like boom, right? And it says something that's really stupid or obviously false, right? People do not point at the billboard and say, that is obviously false. That's not where people go first. Because if you stand up and say, that is obviously false, then you're putting a target on yourself. You're putting a target on yourself. And it doesn't matter if you're correct. Like, that's the most important part. And that's the most important thing to remember. It doesn't matter if you're correct. It matters what everyone else around you thinks. That we're a social organism. Humanity is a social creature. That's why it's so important for the fascists to convince us that we're not, so that we don't actually have an understanding of how we operate as a people. And when you see something that is false, your first instinct is not to say, this is fucking bullshit. Your first instinct is to turn to the person who's beside you and say, huh, that's a thing. Or some kind of banal, kind of vanilla kind of thing, right? You're not going to say, this is fucking fascism. This is a fucking loser right here, right? That's not the first thing you say. The first thing you say is, what do you think about this? Huh, bit interesting, eh? Right? And the guy beside you is playing the same game, right? And you're sussing each other out, right? Like, unless you really trust one another, you are going to try to, and through this process of sussing one another out, you're both just going to concede that, well, there must be something to it, right? It's a big billboard in the middle of Times Square. There must be something to it. It can't be completely false, right? Yeah, so you got it, John. Just like that, exactly the way you're thinking about it, bud. That, and so you can even come to a point where you can say, well, I don't necessarily agree with that, and the guy beside you might actually say the same thing, and that might become the prevailing thing. But it's unlikely that you guys, that anybody will go, it is illegitimate that this idea is being spread through the society this way. And so that's the win, right? It doesn't matter if we all collectively agree that, let's say, Ben Shapiro, or let's use the really fucking easy one, right? Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh calls himself a theocratic fascist. Like, I don't know why this guy is gaining any traction whatsoever, right? Like, the guy calls himself Matt Walsh. Like, this is his Twitter. Theocratic fascist. It's literally the first thing. Like literally the first thing. The only question this guy should ever be asked, the only question this guy should ever be asked is, what social group do you want to round up and purge? And it's obvious what he's going for, right? Translucent rights activist, all this. Like, he's obviously angling to round up the trans people. I think it's obviously what he wants to do. And so even a guy like this, even somebody who is obviously a fascist, so obvious that he calls himself a fascist, right? We still, so even if we disagree with him, right, that doesn't matter, because now he's been legitimized because he's in the conversation. For fuck's sakes, he has 1 million followers. Like, he's got 1 million followers on Twitter. Like, this, when you have, and so when you've got this kind of openness, this kind of despicable openness about it, it's very difficult. Like, I know for myself, like here's my story for you, Mystic. When Jordan Peterson first came out and 12 Rules for Life was around, and I listened to him talk a couple of times, I was very sympathetic to him, right? I was very sympathetic to him. It took me a long time to really put together that he was a fascist, right? Because he's actually more successful than others, right? He does a better job of obscuring his overt fascism, unlike someone like Matt Walsh, right? Matt Walsh is just like hanging it out there, and it's just like, yeah, I'm a fascist. What are you going to do about it? And someone like Ben Shapiro also does like a fairly reasonable job, I would say, of obscuring his fascism. But Peterson's like an expert at it. Peterson's really good at obscuring his own fascism. And so you can go a long way with a lot of these people, especially if they've said something or they've done something that really reaches out to you, really touches you, you know? And it's difficult to turn around and kind of see them for what they are, you know? And someone like Peterson especially is like, he's like a self-help guru, right? Like that's how he spreads his stuff, is that he's there to help you. And by all estimates, he has. Like, of course he has, right? That people have listened to what he has said and been like, you know, I can try better. I can do, like, I need this little kick in the pants to get it, to move it forward and all that kind of stuff. So what Peterson is doing is he's just helping people to do better in a fascist society, right? Like that's what he's doing. I also see the flip side of it, saying Russia has become so similar to Nazi Germany. I still don't see it. Like, Russia is definitely an oligarchy, but, like, in what way has it become similar to Nazi Germany? Have they started rounding up Jews? Have they started rounding up communists? Like, what are they doing that it has convinced you that they're like what has Russia done that has convinced us that they're become similar to Nazi Germany, like actually, and simply waging a war of liberation for the Donbass people, like that's not convincing. Oh yeah, yes, that's absolutely the truth, anemone. Like that, but that was true day one. Like day one of the invasion, Putin is Hitler. Like that's all. Yeah, I mean, because people are largely illiterate. Like we read, I think the last day that I streamed, it was the Barbara Bush Foundation found out that 50% of Americans are illiterate. Like, like that's a serious number. Like that's not small. Like 50%, 50% of the of Americans are illiterate, and when you have that level of illiteracy, like that's how people like Steven Crowder are able to stand up and say that Hitler was a leftist, right? Hey Christopher, how you doing? Could you get around to Brandon Gonez's video on the upcoming election? I don't know if I've got that. Is that in the Discord, bud? Jonathan pointed out a long video on Peterson once. It was really eye-opening. A must-watch. What was it again? Yeah, some more news. Yeah, that's exactly right. Cody Johnson does a really, really good job of exposing these guys, right? And I would actually say he went pretty soft on Peterson. That in the end, I think his kind of seminal point on Peterson was like, he's like your far-right uncle that's just in over his head. And I think that that's kind of true. That Peterson's just kind of in over his head. I don't think he really has a handle on what's going on most of the time. It might be nice to actually play something. Give my voice a rest. The Brandon Gonez Show.
Will you be refunding people?
What are we at? Toronto's having an election. No one's talking about it. Because we all know Tory's going to get back in. That's all. Like, that... Like, there isn't actually a credible candidate that's coming up against Tory, right? Because nobody's willing to back anybody else. And, like, people are so overwhelmed. Like, people are so overwhelmed about what's happening. Like, and overwhelmed is exactly the word. That they don't really care, right? They don't really care about, like, who's the mayor. It's kind of the attitude these days. John, it's getting so ridiculous. I've seen people argue that the Donbass war was proof that Russia is becoming Nazi. Yeah, I mean, again, if you don't acknowledge the coup, right? If you don't acknowledge, like, the literal Nazis shelling the Donbass, you can make kind of whatever claim you like, right? And that's basically where we're at. Like, people can make whatever claim they like these days. Hold on 1 second, guys. I need to go get some water. Oh. Like, this to me is the big problem with what's going on, right? Is that you can basically make whatever claim you like these days. Like, you can say anything you like because nobody actually knows anything. I think that's my kind of big takeaway about what's been going on in the world these days is no one actually does know what's going on. And people are trying to, like, sift through it. Hi, how you doing? Hello. I'm trying to sift through it, right? But I think by and large, people are very lost in the weeds and they don't know what's going on. And moreover, there's huge, like, billionaires, like people with more money than pharaohs, who are doing everything they can to obfuscate and everything they can to just put literal fascists in front of you and try to convince you that fascism is good, right? Like, so it's very reasonable that people would be very disconnected about what's going on. And I mean, let's not fool ourselves, right? Like the internet is no longer a safe space. Like, I remember when I was young, the internet had a kind of Wild West sort of vibe about it, right? Like, I was on the ground floor of internet stuff. I look back and I sort of think, I wish I had have trusted that the internet was going to become a bigger deal, right? Like, I remember I was saying to people, like, yeah, we're going to be watching TV through the internet. And people were, like, rolling their eyes at me and being like, no, that's not going to happen, right? And I wish I had just believed it and been like, no, this is going to happen. And I wish I had moved forward on that kind of stuff more and understood that a little bit clearer. But, you know, I'm just a person. But the internet now is essentially, like, you can't go anywhere without there being CIA and FBI, like, obvious stuff. And we've given these crazed terrorist organizations, like, billions and billions of dollars. Like, there's absolutely no way that you can trust anything that's coming out of the internet anymore, right? Especially on comment sections. So I don't really get involved in comment sections anymore because I assume that there is a lot of there's a lot of terrorists in there, like FBI agents and CIA people. Yeah, you should trust your instincts more, John. Yeah. Well, part of the problem now, Mocked, is like if I wanted to make a lot of money, right? I think I probably could, right? Like if I were to trust my instincts and make, I could probably make a lot of money, right? But I don't want to involve myself in the exploitation of other people. Like that's really what it comes down to. And I would rather die poor and I would rather die poor and knowing that I didn't actively go out of my way to fuck other people over. Because that's the only way that you're actually making money in this society, right? You've got to fuck somebody over. Yeah. Throughout history, Russia has been attacked by the West, and the West has placed the blame on Russia, yeah. Well, yeah, the West has always been anti-Russia, of course. I mean, the Cold War, for God's sakes. And I think that the great tragedy of the relationship between America and Russia, like the Communist project is betrayed by the ruling class of Russia, Khrushchev and Yeltsin and Gorbachev and all these guys. And it's betrayed because the allure of neoliberal oligarchy is too much. These guys want to be rich. They want wealth and power for themselves. And you can tell when you actually look into the way that, especially Yeltsin, they're so hopeful that this move away from communism and this integration into the international system will not only end the Cold War, but will also ally Russia with the West. That post World War II, the West really had an opportunity to look at Russia and be like, okay, we defeated the Nazis, right? Now we can actually come together and build a society, build a global society peacefully, right? That there was an opportunity to do that. And I think it's something that the Russians have always wanted, right? They don't want this perpetual Cold War. They don't want this perpetual fight with the West. They don't want to be perpetually alienated this way. But that's all done. Like, that's all done. There's no hope of that happening anymore. And there was a period of time, like you remember, like I remember the G8, right? Now it's the G7. But you remember the G8. Russia was part of that. And there was this path of integration and this path of getting Russia into the international community. And I think it's when they applied to be part of NATO that it all and got rejected. Like that's the end of it. Like there's no, the rule of the bourgeois democrats will carry within it the seeds of its own destruction. And it's all foolishness. Like, why would you ever reject Russia joining NATO? That should be considered, like, if I was America, if I was the ruling class of America, I would consider that to be a great victory. Like, we created this organization, NATO, in order to fight against the communists. And now, not only has communism been defeated in Russia, now they're applying to join NATO, right? Like, to me, it would be just a slam dunk, right? Like, why reject them? That's the question I keep coming back to. Like, why reject them? What possible reason do you have? And the reason is ultimately because they don't want Russia as an ally. They want to destroy Russia. Yeah, when Russia extends its hand to the West slaps it away. Yeah. Well, and it's backfiring badly. Like, it's backfiring badly for the Western powers. And now you're seeing with the rise of the fascist Giorgia Meloni in Italy, like, this could get very serious very quickly. Like, Europe is about to enter another Europe is about to enter a crisis, right? Like a major crisis. Yeah, they don't want another hegemon, right? They don't want to have their power balanced at all. And it's just going to destroy them, right? It's just going to destroy them. Because what's coming, like, I just don't think people are quite understanding exactly how serious the major crisis is going to be. Like, we are looking at this whole Great Reset narrative, right? Yeah, Great Reset into what? Right? So it's a Great Reset into feudalism, is what it is. And when you hear people like Liz Truss vowing to usher in the Great Reset, you know it's going to be shit. Like, you know it's going to be terrifying. And the response from many countries in Europe is going to be a swing to the far right. That the right wing is going to be better funded. It's going to have more support from the industrialists, from the tech giants, because the absolute last thing that these capitalists want to see is left-wing governments. They're completely disinterested in that, and you're already seeing it happen. And when people start to, like, I think that a single person, like, you can experience hardship for yourself and kind of justify that and accept a certain level of justification. But we're talking about, like, people are going to watch their children freeze. Like, that's the hard truth about what's coming, is that the people of Europe are going to watch their children freeze in places like Germany, right? Certainly the UK, right? And it's and people are not going to tolerate that, right? Like, the average citizen is politically disconnected. The average citizen does not engage in politics, not in any serious way, right? We've been well trained that way. We've been well trained to be politically inactive, right? Going to a ballot box every 4 years and putting a ballot in a ballot box is not being politically active, right? Being politically active is being part of a group and going and actually passing resolutions and ideas, right? And actually demanding some kind of change. Like, that's what being politically active actually means. And yeah, engaging in politics is seen as taboo. You're instantly ostracized. Yeah, you're like a weirdo. And so much of our media trains us to be that way, to think that way, right? I think one of the great characters that leaps to mind is the blonde character in Community, right? That wake up, sheeple, right? And people will suddenly become extremely politically active once they start watching their children freeze. And which groups are going to be the most well organized and the best funded? It's going to be the far right fascists. And the far right fascists are going to say we need to protect our borders. We need to protect our citizens, right? We need to create stronger institutional power, right? And they're going to say a lot of things that are going to appeal to a working class consciousness because the left has been so thoroughly destroyed and so effectively dismantled that they're not really going to have much of a voice even. And so people are going to swing to the right, and it's the consequences of it are going to be pretty significant. Like, and it's going to happen a lot faster than people think. I think that's the thing that I don't think that we are psychologically prepared for. That once the swing to the right like this happens, the change to the society is going to happen very fast. And yeah, the average citizen has no idea about what's to come. Well, and even those of us who are politically engaged don't really know what's about to come. And that's what makes it extra scary. Because these people are not acting in the best interests of even their own nations. And we know that that's true. Like, just take a look at someone like Liz Truss, right? Like, Liz Truss she'll walk around and tell you that what she's doing is for the greatness of the nation and all that kind of stuff, but she's obviously abandoning the UK. She's obviously abandoning her own people. Like, she doesn't give a fuck. She doesn't care, right? She wants money for herself. That's literally all she wants. And it's the same. It was the same with Boris Johnson. It's the same for all of these guys, right? At the end of the day, what they really want is just wealth for themselves, and they see this as a way to get it. And someone like Georgia Maloney is extra scary because she's a straight up fascist. Like, like Liz Truss can at least pretend as though she's a conservative, right? Maloney doesn't. Like, she's a fascist. Like, she straight up looks at Mussolini and is like, he was a great leader. Like, I don't know what more signs you need. And in the meantime, right, Anemone is saying Russia's success might be our only hope. Well, the truth is that Russia has been forced to pivot towards who? Towards China, right? That at the end of the day, the society that we're actually looking at for how the civilization and how the species might actually succeed and actually continue forward is actually China. That Russia is just the front line of it, right? But I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that China is going to just stand by and watch like some kind of apocalypse unfold. Like, China has been playing a game of being neutral, but they're not going to be neutral. And I think that Xi Jinping is fairly aware of it, and that the Chinese are fairly aware of it. Like, this is the big difference between Western countries and a country like Russia and China and the Southeast Asian countries, is that is that those citizens are politically active. And they're politically active for a very good reason, because they're under existential threat. Like, they know what the history of American imperialism is. They're well aware of what the Americans can do. And they view what the Americans are doing as an existential threat. Whereas, like, Westerners don't really care about the Ukraine war. Like, not really. Like, they view the Ukraine war the way that they view, like, an episode of American Idol. Right? They're just picking a side, or like a sports team or something, right? It's just a way for them to feel morally superior and smug without actually knowing anything about what's going on, right? And to the average American citizen, the Ukraine crisis and the Ukraine conflict, it's just another, like, sporting event. Like, it truly doesn't matter. to Americans at all. And they're just rah-rahing for their side because that's what fascists do. Like they don't actually know anything. I think that's the thing that I'm going to constantly be going back to, right? They don't know anything. And that's on purpose. Because if Americans knew anything, they probably wouldn't allow any of this happen, right? Our only hope in Europe to not descend into fascism. I think that's written on the stars at this point, Anemone. I don't think that there's a force on the planet that could prevent that from happening. Like, the society wants to. The people want to. I think that that's just the hard truth that we have to swallow. That, like, people are looking forward to it. I really think that's true. Like, there is this ethos, this burning desire within the culture of the West that people are tired of pretending. People are tired of having to watch their manners and watch their words. People are tired of moralizing. That's why the quote unquote wokeism thing has happened, right? That people want to just be openly despicable and barbaric. That's what they want, right? Like, why else would they be fighting so hard, right? They're tired of being told that they shouldn't be racist. They're tired of being told that they should care about other people. They're tired of being told that we have to live in a society. They're tired of paying taxes. They're tired of doing all of this stuff. Like, they want fascism. They want it. And it's coming. It's coming in a big way. And I don't think that there's anything that could be done. Like, I can't think of anything. Like, what significant event could prevent the decline into fascism at this point? Hey, Grinning, how you doing? I agree that Americans have no idea what's coming. Most people think the U.S. only get their politics in terms of, can I get 8 types of Twinkies? Exactly. Yeah, like, this is why, and this is yet another reason why, like, the descent into fascism is inevitable. Because the quote-unquote left, even though it's not left at all, but the Democrats, like, they're not manifesting anything material, right? They're not actually doing anything. And people will abandon them. Oh. Okay, guys, I hate to do this, and I hate to cut this short, but my voice is not good to go. I'm not good to go. I'm going to try again tomorrow. So please tune in, but I think I got to cut this one short. Whew. This COVID sucks. COVID sucks really bad. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.